Hi, welcome back, 8th grade. This is going to be lesson 21, and this is actually one of the first times I've had to differentiate the lesson from the chapter. So we are not starting chapter 21 today. We're going to finish up chapter 20, and then we're going to try to read or at least start chapter 21. So we're going to wrap up 21st. There are 2 questions left for us to answer. So let's take a peek at what those questions say. And we see question 5 and 6 are the ones that we have left. Question 5 asks, what happened to Papa once Woody returned from Japan? And question 6, why does Papa's dignified bow at the PTA awards dinner humiliate Jean? So let's take a look in our books. We left off on page 164. Follow along with me. When Woody came back from Japan and when Ray came home on leave from the Coast Guard, they would tease me about the short skirts we wore and about my legs, which were near the other extreme from the heavy-thighed daikon ashi of the ballet dancer at Manzanar. They called me gobo ashi, after the long brown twig-like root vegetable gobo. They laughed, but they would show up for parades whenever they were in town, proud of their neighborhood celebrity. It was a pride that Papa didn't share. While I was striving to become Miss America of 1947, he was wishing I'd be Miss Hiroshima of 1904. He would counsel me on the female graces, as he understood them, on the need to conceal certain parts of the body, on the gaudiness of smiling too much. But his tastes could not compete with the pull from the outside world, or from the world outside our family. Sorry, I lost my spot. For one thing, not much of our family remained. Though larger than the rooms at Manzanar, this apartment was still cramped, forcing us kids outside. We ate in shifts. Mama was gone most of the time, and worst of all, I had lost respect for Papa. I never dared show this, but it was true. His scheme for setting up a housing cooperative had failed. With blueprints in hand, he tramped through the Japanese community to hostels, trailer courts, other housing projects like ours, trying to find families who would invest in it. Few had money. Those who did were terrified to let any of it go, and the idea of banking on some kind of matching support from the government seemed laughable after their internment experience. Papa needed an enterprise he could manage from within the family. He decided that a fortune could be made catching shrimp and abalone off the coast of Mexico, then bringing it back to dry and sell in Southern California. Woody was out of the Army by this time and looking for work. As a citizen, he could get a commercial license. So at intervals, he would rent a boat, take it down to Ensenada or below, load up with abalone, bring the catch home, and all the rest of us would spend days cleaning and cutting up the meat and stringing it out to dry in the bedrooms. For months, the apartment reeked of drying seafood. It was almost a brilliant scheme. In 1947, no one was yet drying abalone commercially, but there was a small worm that kept attacking the drying meat. Papa could never figure out how to control it. This plan, too, went to pieces. His failures were sharpened in an odd way by Woody's return. He came back from Japan with his mustache thicker and bearing a sword that had been in the family for 300 years, a gift from Aunt Toyo. He brought other trophies, painted scrolls, lacquered trays, things he would have valued only slightly before the war. All of this delighted Papa, filled him with pride for his son who had returned a larger man, with a surer sense of himself and of where we had all come from. Yet, while Woody grew, Papa seemed to shrink, losing potency. Their roles had been reversed. Before the war, he had been the skipper. Now, He depended more and more on Woody, who had youth and a citizen's mobility, who could license the boat or cross borders easily. Ever more vulnerable, Papa began drinking heavily again, and I would watch it with sorrow and disgust, unable then to imagine what he was going through, too far into my own junior high school survival. I couldn't understand why he was home all day when Mama had to go out working. I was ashamed of him for that, and in a deeper way, for being what had led to our imprisonment, that is, for being so unalterably Japanese. I would not bring my friends home for fear of what he would say or do. So just to pause for a second, please make sure that you include some details over what we just talked about what happened to Papa once Woody returned from home. There's a couple different pieces here. So Woody returns more of a man, which he's proud of that. He's proud of his son and what he has become. But at the same point, they end up switching roles to some degree. And Woody is the one, because he's a citizen, it can do certain things and allow Papa to work to some degree. Papa has to rely on Woody for all of these things because he is not a citizen. And because of these circumstances, it makes Papa sort of depressed and makes him start drinking again. So we have multiple details, layer upon layer there, that you should include there as far as what happened to Papa once Woody returns. This also ties into why Jean is ashamed of him. Think about it. Jean is now about your age, maybe a little bit younger. I think they said she's 13. And she is ashamed of her father. I know there are many times when we're out in public and my children are 20 feet in front or 20 feet behind me, and don't wish to admit that I am their parent, or my husband in public. He's the one who embarrasses them. I think it's at school that they wish to distance themselves from me. Either way, the point is, it's very common for a teenager to not be terribly proud of their parents. They start to distance themselves. But in this case, Jean is in a more extreme situation because she looks at Papa as being the one who makes her different. It's all his fault. So, and the fact that he's home all day, go away, you know, he wants some space. All right, I talked too much again. Let's take a look back at the book. We're on page 166, the very last paragraph. When he refused to show up for the parades I marched in, this separated me from him that much more. Well, the events he did show up for left me miserable with embarrassment. One night, the local PTA held an awards dinner for all the students in the Scholarship Society. I was among them. And this was the sort of achievement Papa encouraged. He and Mama dressed up for the dinner. They overdressed. It was the first time they had mixed socially with Caucasians since leaving camp. Papa seldom spoke to Caucasians during those years or at any time afterward. When he did, it was a point of honor to appear supremely dignified. He still thought of himself as an aristocrat. He bought himself a brand new single-breasted suit of brown, worsted for this occasion, with a matching brown vest and a brown and yellow flowered silk tie. Mama wore a maroon crepe dress with long sleeves, a necklace of shimmering gold discs, and a black Persian lamb coat I had not seen since before the war. She wore her hair in an upsweep. I knew she felt elegant and glad to be there. She smiled continually, smiled at everyone, as if to make up for Papa's solemn courtesies. When it came time for each student to be presented a certificate, the parents were introduced. Most of them stood up hastily or waved from their chairs, like Radine's dad, a big ruddy Texan, just as unfamiliar with this scene as Papa was. He blushed, grinned foolishly, and everybody grinned back, loving him. I was standing at the head of the table, shaking the principal's hand. When Papa rose, his face ceremoniously grave, and acknowledged the other parents with his most respectful gesture. He pressed his palms together at his chest and gave a slow, deep, Japanese bow from the waist. They received this with a moment of careful, indecisive silence. He was unforgivably a foreigner then. Foreign to them, foreign to me, foreign to everyone but Mama, who sat next to him smiling with pleased modesty. 12 years old at the time, I wanted to scream. I wanted to slide out of sight under the table and dissolve. So instead of, that casual little wave or standing up to be acknowledged as to who he was, he did the very Japanese thing, put his hands, and then right over from the waist, bowed all the way down, which they haven't forgotten the war. We're only 2 years out. So obviously, they weren't rude. They didn't say anything. They didn't boo or yell, but they made no response. And to Jean, she was totally embarrassed because her father has set her apart as a foreigner. All right, let's take a look at chapter 21 now. So we're going to continue with that. I don't know that we'll have enough time to finish all of chapter 21 today if I'm going to do these in 20-minute lessons. So yep, chapter 21 is quite a bit longer. So I think we'll probably have a second lesson for chapter 21 as well. So chapter 21, the first question we see is when the high school's marching band director wants to give Jean the baton twirling assignment. What does he have to do first? What does this show about post-war sentiment in Long Beach, California? Question 2, what happened that caused Papa to stop drinking alcohol? So we know he started drinking again, something will make him stop. 3, Papa decides to return to life as a farmer, relocating the family yet again to San Jose. Explain how this move helped Jean. And question 4, why did Jean decide to go exotic in competing to become carnival queen? Was this an effective strategy? And what does her use of her feminine power show the reader? And question 5, in what way was Leonard Rodriguez heroic? And what might have been his motive in helping Jean? And we'll take a look at 6 and then I'll pause because I don't think we'll get that far. Should Jean have protested when she found out the administration was trying to fix the voting? Why or why not? And I think 5 and 6 are pretty close together, which is why I read both of those. All right, so back to our books. Let's take a look at chapter 21, and we are on page 169. The Girl of My Dreams. That bow was from the world I wanted out of, while the strutting sequined partnership I had with Radine was exactly how I wanted my life to go. My path through the next few years can be traced by its relationship to hers. It was a classic situation. In many ways, we had started even. Poor whites from West Texas, her family was so badly off sometimes, she'd come to school with no lunch and no money, and we would split whatever I had brought along. At the time, we were both getting all this attention together with the drum and bugle corps. After 3 years at our junior high school in a ghetto neighborhood that included many Asians, Blacks, Mexicans, and other white migrants from the South, we had ended up close to being social equals. We stayed best friends until we moved to Long Beach Polytechnic, which is the high school. There, everything changed. Our paths diverged. They're going different ways. She was asked to join high school sororities. The question of whether or not I should be asked was never even raised. The boys I had crushes on would not ask me out. They would flirt with me in the hallways or meet me after school, but they would ask Radine to the dances, or someone like Radine, someone they could safely be seen with. Meanwhile, she graduated from baton twirler to song girl, a much more prestigious position in those days. It was unthinkable for a Nisi to be a song girl. Even choosing me as majorette created problems. The band teacher knew I had more experience than anyone else competing that year. He told me so, but he was afraid to use me. He had to go speak to the board about it and to some of the parents to see if it was allowable for an Oriental to represent the high school in such a visible way. It had never happened before. I was told that this inquiry was being made, and my reaction was the same as when I tried to join the Girl Scouts. I was apologetic for imposing such a burden on those who had to decide. When they finally assented, I was grateful. After all, I was the first Oriental majorette they'd ever had, even if my once enviable role now seemed vaguely second-rate. Still, I determined to try twice as hard to prove they'd made the right choice. So that gets into the first question that we had. She had been a majorette, not in the school band in junior high, but in front of the Boy Scouts. So that was a decision up to the boys' fathers. But now that she's in school, she has to audition. And the band teacher knows that she's good, knows that she has experience, but before he can give her the position, what does he have to do? He has to go present it to the school board to see if, because they're going to go compete against other schools, she's representing their high school, are they going to allow a Japanese girl to represent their school? That almost seems just bizarre to me that they would do that, because obviously if a Caucasian girl auditions, they're not going to go ask the board, can we have this child represent us? No, but because she is different, they do have to go ask. And it sounds like at this point she is allowed to do it. So thankfully that was the outcome, but he felt the need to ask. Continuing on page 171. This sort of treatment did not discourage me. I was used to it. I expected it, a condition of life. What demoralized me was watching Radine's success. We had shared everything, including all the values I'd learned from the world I wanted into. Not only standards of achievement, but ideas about how a girl should look and dress and talk and act, and ideas of male beauty, which was why so many of the boys I liked were Caucasian. Because I so feared never being asked, I often simply made myself unavailable for certain kinds of dates. If one of them had asked, of course, I would have been mortified. That would mean coming to Cabrillo Homes to pick me up, and the very thought of one of his daughters dating a Caucasian would have started Papa raving. He would have chased the fellow across the grass. This was my dilemma. Easy enough as it was to adopt white American values, I still had a Japanese father to frighten my boyfriends and a Japanese face to thwart my social goals. I never wanted to change my face or to be someone other than myself. What I wanted was the kind of acceptance that seemed to come so easily to Radine. To this day, I have a recurring dream which fills me each time with a terrible sense of loss and desolation. I see a young, beautifully blonde and blue-eyed high school girl moving through a room full of others her own age. Much admired by everyone, men and women both, myself included. As I watch through a window, I feel no malice toward this girl. I don't even envy her. Watching, I am simply emptied. And in the dream, I want to cry out because she is something I can never be. Some possibility in my life that can never be fulfilled. It is a schoolgirl's dream, one I tell my waking self I've long since outgrown, yet it persists. Once or twice a year, she will be there, the boyfriend surrounded queen who passed me by. Surely her example spurred me on to pursue what now seems ludicrous, but at the time was the height of my post-Manzanar ambitions. It happened in Long Beach. There, I felt defeated. I watched Radine's rise, and I knew I could never compete with that. Gradually, I lost interest in school and began hanging around on the streets. I would probably have dropped out for good, but it was just about this time that Papa decided to go back into farming and finally moved us out of Cabrillo Homes. A few months earlier, he had almost killed himself on a combination of whiskey and some red wine made by an Italian drinking buddy of his. He had been tippling steadily for 2 days when he started vomiting blood from his mouth and nose. It sobered him up permanently. He never touched alcohol again. After that, he pulled himself together, and when the chance came along to lease a sharecrop, 100 acres from a big strawberry grower up in Santa Clara Valley, he took it. That's where he stayed until he died, raising premium berries outside of San Jose. So there was your answer to what was it, which was question 2, what happened that caused Papa to stop drinking. One of his Italian buddies who had made some combination of whiskey and red wine made him so sick that he was actually coughing up blood and he almost died. So he never drinks again after that point. Continuing 173. I was a senior when we moved. In those days, so 1951, San Jose was a large town, but not yet a city. Coming from a big high school in Southern California gave me some kind of shine, I suppose. It was a chance to start over, and I made the most of it. By the spring of that year, when it came time to elect the annual carnival queen from the graduating seniors, my homeroom chose me. I was among 15 girls nominated to walk out for inspection by the assembled student body on voting day. I knew I couldn't beat the other contestants at their own game, that is, look like a bobby soxer. Yet, neither could I look too Japanesey. I decided to go exotic with a flower print sarong, black hair loose, and a hibiscus flower behind my ear. When I walked barefooted out onto the varnished gymnasium floor between the filled bleachers, the howls and whistles from the boys were double what had greeted any of the other girls. It sounded like some winning basket had just been made in the game against our oldest rivals. It was pretty clear what the outcome would be, but ballots still had to be cast and counted. The next afternoon, I was standing outside my Spanish class when Leonard Rodriguez, who sat next to me, came hurrying down the hall with a revolutionary's fire in his eye. He helped out each day in the administration office. He had just overheard some teachers and a couple of secretaries counting up the votes. "They're trying to stuff the ballot box," he whispered loudly. "They're fudging on the tally. They're afraid to have a Japanese girl be queen. They've never had one before. They're afraid of what some of the parents will say." He was pleased he had caught them, and more pleased to be telling this to me, as if some long-held suspicion of conspiracy had finally been confirmed. I shared it with him. Whether this was true or not, I was prepared to believe that teachers would stuff the ballot box to keep me from being queen. For that reason, I couldn't afford to get my hopes up. I said, "So what?" He leaned toward me eagerly with final proof. "They want Lois Carson to be queen. I heard them say so." If applause were any measure, Lois Carson wasn't even in the running. She was too slim and elegant for beauty contests, but her father had contributed a lot to the school. He was on the board of trustees. She was blonde, blue-eyed. At that point, her name might as well have been Radine. I was ready to capitulate without a groan. So capitulate means to surrender without arguing at all. Okay. I am actually going to pause at this awkward in-between spot, even though I would like to continue. I believe I've hit the 20-minute mark. I have not set my timer, so I'm not 100% sure. But I do want to go back to those questions real quick. We did get up to number 5. Maybe a little bit of 6, too. So when she went exotic, this was the fact. She didn't really wear exactly all Japanese things, but she definitely played on the idea that she is a little exotic, maybe even a little Hawaiian, but the hibiscus flower is more Japanese. So pointing out, not trying to look like she's American, though, to help her win. So she's using that feminine power. Is that effective? clearly the boys seem to have liked that. The tough part here is that she's once again using that feminine power, which isn't really having them vote for her. They're voting for something else there. 5, so why is this heroic of Leonard that he comes and he tells her? And I think there may just be a little bit more to this when we read tomorrow, but I'm not 100% sure. I didn't preview exactly where I was going to stop. And then 6, should she have protested when she found out? At this point, it sounds like she's not going to, if she's going to capitulate. And then we'll double check that as we get into that tomorrow. So I would start, definitely answer 1, 2, 3, and get a start on 4 and 5, and we'll wrap 4 and 5 up tomorrow when we hopefully finish the chapter. All right, so I'll stop the share so that I can end the video. Have a great day.